All right, here we are, semester review part 4. First thing we're going to refresh over is solving quadratics by graphing. The way we solve by graphing, first we have to get it equal to 0. So I have to move this 6 to the other side. We added 2x squared plus an x and then minus 6 equals 0. Once you get it to equal 0, you get to take everything that's equal to 0 and get to plug it into your calculator to figure out what your parabola looks like. So when we turn our calculator on, you can add a page, add a graph page, and we're going to plug in 2x squared plus an x minus 6. When you plug that into your graph, this is what our graph looks like. I notice that I have one y or x-intercept at -2, and I have another one that's in between 1 and 2. One way to find this other one, you can hit menu. You can go down to Analyze Graph, and you can ask it to find that 0 for you. We call the where it crosses the x-axis zeros, so you can hit 0. You can go, since we're looking at just this one, you'll go to the left a little bit, and go to the right a little bit, and it'll tell you that exact point. So when you're sketching your graph over here, identify a x-axis and a y-axis. And from there, we can plot this point at -2, 0, and then 1.50. So here's my -2, 0. Here's my 1.50. And you can sketch in your parabola. The solutions are where it crosses the x-axis, and you always want to give it to me either as a whole number or a fraction. So this 1.5 is the same as 3/2, so this is like a 3/2 0 point. Here it's a -2, 0. Okay, so our solutions are x equals a -2 and x can equal a 3/2. Or if you said 1.5, I would take that as well. Okay, so you solve by graphing. If the parabola doesn't touch the the x-axis, the parabola would have no solution, no real solution. It would be an imaginary number. If it only touches at one point, you only have one solution. So the next thing we're going to talk about is solving by factoring. Again, it has to be equal to 0, and in this case it is. So we need to factor this 3x squared plus 10x minus 8. These factoring notes should be on page 36 of your composition notebook, and you might want to look at 35 to look at that flow chart again. To find the solutions or the roots to this equation, we have to factor it. Since we have a number in front of our x squared, we have to do bottoms up. So we're going to slide that 3 over. You get x squared plus 10x minus 3 times 8 is 24. From there, we do that bottoms up. We do -24 and 10, which would be 12 times a -2 gives us a -24, and 12 minus 2 gives us 10. So we add a x plus 12, x minus 2. The next step to bottoms up is to divide by whatever you slide by. So I'm going to divide by 3, divide by 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4, so our first factor is an x plus 4. 3 doesn't go into 2, so we're going to move 3 up in front. So we got a 3x minus 2. Okay, the solutions or the roots are what does x have to be to make those factors 0. So we had a x plus 4 times a 3x minus 2. That was the same equation. These are our factors. This is the expanded form, or what's FOILed, what happens when you FOIL. So from here, you're saying what does x have to be to make this factor 0? Well, if you plug in a number for x, if I plug in a -4, -4 plus 4 is 0, so that's one of my solutions. On this one, it's a little more tricky to see, so if you can't tell just by looking at it, 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. You're saying, hey, I want this factor to be equal to 0. Now I'm going to solve for x. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. We get 3x equals 2. Divide by 3, so you get x equals 2/3. That's your other solution. X can equal 4 and x can equal 2/3. Both of those numbers will make that quadratic equation work. Okay. If they tell you what the roots are, You have positive and negative 2i. And it tells you what the factors are and what is the equation. Okay, you take the factors and you FOIL. Okay, we got a x plus 2i times a x minus 2i. And for the equation, it has to equal 0. That's where we get the equation equals 0. So let's FOIL. X times x is x squared. X times a negative 2i is a negative 2ix. 2i times x is a positive 2ix. And a 2i times a negative 2i, 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. I times I is I squared. If you have a negative 2ix and a positive 2ix, those are going to cancel each other out. So we're left with the x squared. And then I squared is always a negative 1. So a negative 4 times a negative 1 is a positive 4. And all that is equal to 0. That's our equation. So the equation that has these two factors is going to be x plus 4. Okay, if they give you other factors like, say, x plus 7 and a 3x minus 2, okay, if those are your other factors and they're saying those are your factors, what's your equation? You just FOIL it, set it equal to 0, FOIL the side, and you'll get your equation. All right. From here, it says find the solution using the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Hopefully you're singing Pop Goes the Weasel in your head. Here we have a equals 1, b equals 8, c equals 5. We're going to plug everything in. So we got x equals a negative b, so a negative 8, plus or minus the square root of 8 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 5, all over 2 times 1. From there, we get a negative 8 plus or minus the square root of, this is 64 minus 4 times 1 times 5, that's 20. 64 minus 20 is a 44 divided by 2. 2 times 1 is 2. From here, you want to look to see if you can simplify the square root. Can we take the square root of 44 and get a nice pretty number? No. So we have to take the square root of 44 and we need to reduce it or simplify it, how we practiced a week before Thanksgiving. So I can break up 44 into the square root of 4 times the square root of 11. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 11 is messy, so we'll leave it the square root of 11. So I could rewrite this as negative 8 plus or minus, and instead of the square root of 44, I could write 2 square roots of 11 divided by 2. Since we can't add these two numbers nice and easy, so we're not going to split up our fraction into negative 8 plus 2 and negative 8 minus 2. We're going to divide into both parts. Remember, you never divide into the square root. You only divide into the numbers in front. So negative 8 divided by 2 is a negative 4. Then plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1. So 1 square root of 11, but you don't have to write 1. You can just write the square root of 11. That's your solution. X equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 11. This last one here, finding the vertex. Remember that the x value of the vertex is the same as negative b over 2a. That's also the axis of symmetry. X equals that number. Our a value is 1, our b value is 4, and our c value is negative 3. So to find the vertex, we could plug in this formula either into your calculator and plot the vertex, figure out where it is, or you could look on your table. I'm going to plot that. I got an x squared plus 4x minus 3. That's what my graph looks like. From here, if I want to find the vertex, I can hit Menu, Analyze Graph. Is that vertex a minimum or a maximum? Well, since your parabola goes like this, there's a low point. It's a minimum, so I can hit 2. And I can ask that graph to find that vertex for me. There it says it's negative 2, 7. Sorry, negative 2, negative 7. Your axis of symmetry is that negative b over 2a. If we did a negative b, we would have a negative 4 over 2 times a, which is 1. Okay, negative 4 divided by 2 is a negative 2. So our axis of symmetry is at negative 2. Remember that the axis of symmetry and the x value of the vertex are always the same. Double check. Does this graph have a minimum or a maximum? Okay, since it has a low point, it's a minimum. And what is that value? It's the y value of the vertex, so it's at that negative 7. The next one is the y-intercept. Remember that the last number, if it's in standard form, if it's got an x squared plus an x and then another number, the y-intercept is always the number at the end, so that negative 3 is where our y-intercept is. The domain is talking about the x values. The parabolas will always have x values that go to the left forever and to the right forever. So we say that's all real numbers. And then the range is how low or how high does that graph go. Since the range is the y values, our lowest y point is at negative 7. Okay, and our parabola goes up. So does y need to be bigger than or less than negative 7? Since the parabola goes up, all our y's need to be greater than negative 7. They can equal negative 7 because we have a point there, and then they get bigger. The last one, describing transformations. You want to remember that the number in front tells you if it's a reflection or stretch or compression. The number inside tells you left or right. The number outside tells you up or down. So that negative 2 tells us there's a reflection because it's negative. The 2 tells us since it's a fraction or a number that's bigger than 1, it's not in between 0 and 1. That means it's going to stretch by 2. The 3 inside means the h, you always have to flip the sign as a positive 3. So that means it's going to move to the right 3. And that 10 on the outside means it's going to move down 10. Okay, that's the review for quadratics. Have fun.